Patience, patience, patience is what we're needing right now as the market is approaching all-time highs yet again, trying to break through that pivotal SPY 600 level, that QQQ 531, and that IWM 210 and some change. So welcome to the video, everybody. Today, I want to give you some insight, kind of a midweek sentiment of how you should be approaching this new month of June, settling in. We're getting some momentum to the upside. We're getting knocked back down. We're getting some consolidation, kind of coiling up for that next big move. And we have some key data at the end of this week that we'll be approaching, which is non-farm payrolls, along with AVGO earnings after hours on Thursday. So after hours on Thursday into Friday is going to be very pivotal. Now, I will say that there are some bullish setups that are presenting right now on some Mag 7 stocks, some beaten down stocks. So what I've been doing personally, along with my Leverage University members inside of our Discord, we've been thinking more of a longer outlook swing trade idea, some call options out until August and into the fall time. And July 18th is another date that we've been looking at, right? Because there are some stocks right now that are sitting in some supports that we can begin grabbing up, as we call it, starter positions, some earlier entries, and then add to it as we get more confirmation, so we don't quote unquote miss the move. Okay. We have Apple, their developer event next week, which last year in the developer event, they just took off to the moon. So I'm really eyeing Apple. I like Google right now as well. That's been beaten down in the Mag 7, along with Amazon that is presenting some bullish momentum up above that 206.50 level. So we'll talk about it all here today. I'll give you a game plan for the remainder of the week and throughout the remainder of the month, and how you can kind of chill into the summer, right? Taking some risk off, enjoying yourself, but also making some money as well. All right. If you want to join Leverage University, also, if you don't have a brokerage, would love for you to support. You can if you want. If you use someone else's link, that's fine. But if you like this channel and you don't have one of the two brokerages that I am affiliated with down below, which is Webull along with Robinhood, you can download those down below and it'll give you some free shares. It also helps the channel out, so I'd appreciate that. If you are in the market for a futures account, if you want to learn the futures market, I'm also affiliated with Top One Futures. That is an affiliate link. It does help out the channel as well. So all those links will be down below. Join Leverage University. We'd love to have you. And let's, without further ado, jump into the market today. All right. So let's look here at SPY. Okay. So what you just heard me say was that we're at almost all-time highs. Okay. So this is more of a coiling kind of consolidation zone that we're in. If I draw a rectangle here from here down to that 583 level, we're kind of sitting right in that zone. Okay. And if you see that zone of consolidation, we've broken out of that zone, which was that key 595. If you want to make it more so 596 level, we've broken above that previous high on a daily. Okay. And this would be technically a retest. Okay. So what you want to see is we want to really see this week come off of that level and take out that 598 and take out that 600. That's what investors are really looking for. And that's maybe what you're looking for, is to say, man, we're almost there. We're so bullish. We're so bullish, right? And we're continuing up, and can we squeeze up? But we have to clear, because what can happen is that when you're dependent on things that are outside of your control, which is why I'm saying patience right now, we can't control what the data is going to do and how market makers may want to react up here, because we have seen before that before we go to 600, we can pull back a little bit back into that zone, which is really what we don't want to see, but it can happen. So we can pull back into the zone and chop again some more. Okay. So that's really more so what I'm seeing right now. If you can see right here, the exhaustion that's kind of happening up here, where we got knocked back down after NVIDIA earnings from 598 after hours with that, not NVIDIA earnings, but this is more so that Trump pause, or excuse me, block on his tariff from the Supreme Court, excuse me. So that was that pump and dump. All right. So we really want to hold above that 595 and then reclaim that 596 and start moving back up towards that 598 and see if we can take out 600. And personally, I think it's going to be AVGO earnings and or non-farm payrolls that will do that. One of the two will send us one way or the other. Okay. Which is why I am kind of telling my members, along with maybe you guys as well, I said, hey, just be patient. because if you're scalping or day trading in here, or if you're putting on a lot of risk up here, I'm loading the boat with calls, or I'm loading the boat with shares up here. Just be very mindful of that. Okay. So that is SPY. Let's go into QQQ and do the same thing. All right. So QQQ is building a little bit more here. As you can see, it broke out of that 523, but again, it's still sitting close to that 531. So I would say QQQ has a little bit more, in the NASDAQ has a little bit more strength above that consolidation zone, which is 523. All right. So I have a little bit more bullish outlook, and I'll show you why. With the NASDAQ and some of the Mag 7 that could take off QQQ up to 536 and then 540 there. All right. So if we get a pullback somewhere around this 526 level, 525, we can see a little bit of a hold that's happening right at that 525.50 to 526. All right. So that's holding right there, which is that previous high from the 29th of May. All right. So I would say this looks really good. I like the NASDAQ chart a little bit better here because it's broken out of that 523, pull back to this 526 potentially, and then reclaim and get above that 530. And then we can start squeezing like that. All right. So it's kind of coincides. Now, if we get a deeper pullback into that moving average there, that 20 daily moving average, that 20 moving average right there, if you see on a 4 hour is right at that 523, and it's just riding this wave. So you can see when it gets above that daily or 4 hour 20 here, but the daily 20, that light blue line there, it kind of rides it as a wave and kind of takes off above it. So it is holding above it right now, starting to build separation from that light blue line. And then can we take off? And that looks really good. The only thing that could spoil the party is if AVGO or non-farm payrolls comes in and the market doesn't like us, pulls us back into that zone. All right. So you really want QQQ to hold above 523 or take out 531. Okay. Pull back to 523, take out 531. Okay. Let's see here. Let's go to IWM. IWM. If I were to look at IWM on a daily chart, this looks like an inverse head and shoulders. Okay. If you're not too familiar with that, inverse head and shoulders, it is a structured formation that guides traders and investors of what may happen next. So if you see there, here's a clearer one right there. There's the shoulder, there's the head, has a failure to go lower, builds that right shoulder, starts building momentum and holds, takes out that neckline as we call it, and then takes off. All right. So if this is true, all we need is IWM to break above this 210, maybe get above into the 211s. If we can have a break above 211, right? I like IWM to the upside and it will squeeze. All right. However, it's getting stuck. So we can't take that until you see right there chasing into 211 right back down. So what I would like is to see IWM pull back into this 205, 206, hold there, and then start building. All right. Now, if you're a scalper or a day trader, you can use that 210, 209 as a reference, and you can see a pop and then maybe scalp it down to 205, 206. Right. But I wouldn't get too aggressive to the downside with this, hold and all these buyers and this reclaim right there, that rotation back up. And even yesterday, IWM having a lot of bullish momentum, pull back. And then can we take that kind of bullish momentum and rotate it over, right? And take that out, right? So IWM, I'd keep an eye on it, turn some alerts on above 211 and see if we can have that or a pullback into like 205, 206. So it's in this range, which is right here. Okay. So there's IWM, and that's, again, you're seeing the pattern here with all three main indexes. I do have the DIA, which is the Dow Jones, our US 30, right? But if you can see there, our three main indexes, which most people trade day in and day out, are just kind of stuck in which way are we going. Some are stronger than others, right? I consider NASDAQ or Qs, triple Qs, kind of breaking out a little bit more. SPY, getting a little bit stuck here, still breaking out, but I think that's more so some of the stocks, healthcare, this UNH having a little bit of a tough time, kind of getting above, kind of dragging that down, the healthcare sector a little bit. So Apple getting hit with that downgrade, things like that. All right. So let's go into some of my bullish stocks first. Let's talk bullish, and I'll go into some of the semiconductors. So some of them that I like into the next couple of weeks. Let's talk about Google here. Okay. And for reference, inside of our community, I have been eyeing Google here. All right. So this is Leverage University. Okay. You can see here that it is packed full of information. It is segmented into different folders. If you can see here, Community Hub, you see that little arrow. Those are different kind of folders or areas that you can go in, our hubs. Okay. And we want to go into our trading floor here. We have a crypto hub. So when I click there, we can update on what's going on with crypto. And then our trading floor, more specifically, if I click there, it goes down and there's different chats and channels. And then what I like to do personally, maybe a little bit different than other Discords, is I'm pretty, I consider myself pretty OCD in organization. So trade ideas are separated into specific, as we call it, threads or folders. Okay. So you can see the chat, and then it's subsect into different folders so people can find it pretty easily what I'm talking about. So it's just not one big thread. All right. So if I go into swing trades, which I'm looking at right now, and I go into Google calls, okay, go into Google calls, and what I'm looking for with Google, I've been updating for the past really, I talked about this on Stock Sermon Sunday, which is our Sunday analysis yesterday. I was looking at Google right here. All right. See that light blue line? That's that daily 20 moving average. Okay. Stocks like to hold above or bullish above a daily 20 moving average. And I saw this reaction off of that daily 20 almost immediately. You can see right there, it's 164.77 or 165 more specifically. Right, we're getting some positive reactions. Last time it was holding up that 165 area. It took off back to roughly about 175 and then 180 and then gapped all the way up here. All right. So I'm kind of looking at this. If it holds this, this could just be a bullish inverse head and shoulders. And I've been updating all day about what Google has been doing at this level. All right. Building, kind of pushing down, failure to go lower. Failure to go lower, getting some bullish change of direction. All right. Updating even on the higher time frames, not really liking that type of candle, but it could be a trap, and it definitely was. Started to get bullish momentum. And then the reason I'm eyeing Google like a hawk, look at this, kind of breaking out of this downtrend and breaking back above. Okay. And towards the end of the day, getting strong close over that yellow line. And then I finally said, hey, I'm in. I like this. I'll keep a stop loss below those lows, and I'm going to go ahead and get some starter entries. Okay. So that is what I'm looking at with Google here. And you can see what it's doing right now on a daily, right? We turned that daily kind of Reddit candle and flipped it green, which I like. Okay. And on a 4 hour, you can see it building after hours, right? So Google may watch into next week and into kind of the June 20th date, and obviously for the rest of the month. Okay. I think there could be a big move off of Google if it starts holding above this 168 level. Okay. Targets 171, 172.5, and then ultimately 175. And then, if you have longer dated contracts, we could get that 180 potentially if we break above 177. All right. So that's how the kind of trade idea looks like for right now. Good risk to reward. I like it. We just need a big break above those levels for the remainder of the week, but we still got to keep our head on a swivel for non-farm payrolls, AVGO earnings. But I like it. It's been beaten down. I think shares are great here as well. Shares are great. Obviously, as always, you don't have to just take the trade idea with calls. You can buy shares as well. My stop loss will be below that 165 level. If we fail below that, then I'll stop out and go from there. But right now, looking pretty good. Still forming higher lows. That's one of my top watches. Love that Google chart right now for at least a retest of those highs. All right. Cool. Another one, Apple. Apple has been very interesting here. I know it got a downgrade. Okay. It got a downgrade, But a lot of times the fear mongering comes in with stocks right before big news events. Okay. Apple's hit with a downgrade. But if you watched Apple today, Apple was actually building strength off open, then got hit with that downgrade, and a lot of concerns with Apple, with concerns I put in quotes, with their AI and Siri and them being behind Google and Microsoft and a lot of other Magnificent Seven companies. Meta, absolutely, we'll talk about that, just taking off right now, almost back to 700. But I would keep a very big eye when they're sleeping giants. That is the time to pay attention to them, not be fear mongered by some of this news. So let's go back and let me show you what's happening next week with Apple. Okay, next week with Apple. If I go to my Apple and I go here, if you did not know, they're having their developer event or developers conference next week. Right? So beaten down. Anticipation for this developer conference, which can go either way, but I would say Apple has been consolidating here with still some higher lows forming, right? Obviously, it needs that break above that 215, but I want to show you something that happened last developer conference last year on June 10th of last year, okay? So this was the week of the developer conference right here, okay? They had the developer conference, 194 was sitting right in a level of support, building up into it, and then took off right to 220, right? So that was the catapult that they needed. Now, again, we're sitting right here in some higher lows, kind of like NVIDIA was doing before it took off, right? I want you to look at this kind of NVIDIA setup right there before it took off. Remember, we were trying to get above that kind of 115, 116 sitting here and then just took off right there. It's kind of what I'm looking at with Apple sort of right here. Obviously, this could be either way, right? You can see there, is that a bear flag or does it break above that 207 again and we target 215? And then there is a gap above 215 into 220, 225. Okay. So I want to show you here those gaps that are presented on Apple. All right. Look at that upside potential on Apple if that developer conference comes in well. So if we can get, pullback, these are all supports, 195, 198, 200, 201, and it's sitting right in support. So I'm kind of looking and eyeing this, maybe grabbing some longer dated calls and also shares, obviously, for folks, shares as well, that Apple could look really good and surprise folks, in my opinion, potentially. But we want to keep a stop loss, as always, below that 193 level. Okay, below that 195, 193, I would say more so 193. So I'm going to eye Apple for the next week's approaching and kind of look at kind of just some of these call options here into July 18th. Their earnings are at the end of the month of July. So I could see Apple, we charted out back to that 215, 220 level. So those could be, if you have a larger account or if you're willing to spend $300 on, some shorter dated and a couple months out, roughly about a month and a half out. You could push it further if you'd like as well, if you want to chill for the summer and kind of go into, some of these, August 15th or even further. But I truly think Apple won't sit down here for much longer, depending on what that developer conference, and that gap will get filled. All right. So would love for it to hold, start showing some strength, and then maybe getting some early option calls out into July. And, I would say a higher risk is through the developer conference, which would be the June 20th date. I would put it a little bit closer here. Could definitely get a pop into 210 potentially. I would look at that one. I think anything outside of that would just be more of a lotto, as we call it. Kind of like the last developer conference, right? If they do well for the developer conference, remember June of last year, could just pop, right? But I don't want to really kind of go that far out of the money necessarily, that short dated personally. Okay. All right. Another one, Amazon. So those are my top three: Google, Apple, Amazon, that have been just building and holding and holding. They just need a positive catalyst. All right. So Amazon here, again, that daily 20 sitting right there, roughly at 203. Okay. And we're starting to build above this previous high. If I move it up right there in that whole zone, starting to build above that 206 level. Okay. It's kind of holding this level here. But as we know, anything could shock the market. And I've got to be aware, or you've got to be aware as well. If SPY and QQQ can't really get that push, right, that could potentially happen, right? So that is why I'm saying we got to keep our head on a swivel, because we have some good looking things, but the market likes to trap buyers at certain levels or to drive the price back down, buy it lower, and then rip it right back up. Okay, so I really want Amazon to hold above this 206, 207 area, start building and holding on higher time frames. And if it can take out that 209 area, I think we'll see a squeeze into 210, and then we've got 212 in sight. And I'd be very careful up here personally, because you can see there's a lot of sellers stacked up underneath that 215 area. So it's ironic that Apple and Amazon have roughly the same price point, so you can kind of keep an eye on both of those. So Amazon, I like it. If it can get some momentum and hold, okay? If it can get some momentum and hold. All righty. Let's go to NVIDIA, and I'll go to Tesla as well, because Tesla is giving us some sell signals potentially, with Elon running his mouth as of late, not agreeing with that bill from Trump, okay? So the semiconductor sector in general. Okay, let's go to SMH. Okay, that's why I wanted to save some of these. And before I do that, I said I would go through some of the text. Look at Meta. Just absolutely broke through tremendously with volume, with solid bullish candles here, break out of that wedge, right, and start building strength. And I see nothing but room into 700. So we'll watch that 700 break above 700. Right, we got some squeeze action going here, but we need to watch that psych level of 700 approaching and see what it does there. It's already made its move. So if you're looking for trading Meta call options, right, you need some type of pullback, or just be careful of a little scalp into 700. You got a little bit more room to go. If it breaks above 700, there you go. All right. And then Microsoft last. A mag 7 here, other than the video. I'll go into that. Sitting at all-time highs, 470 in sight, gets above this 460, just keeps breaking above. I don't really see anything interesting here. It's just been grinding up after its earnings. Great earnings, just grinding and grinding and grinding. Personally, it sounds crazy to think, but I mean, if you know, you know. If you see what I'm seeing, right, what I'm really looking for is something will shock the market at some point. If we squeeze to new highs, or we squeeze back to all-time highs, right, there's a lot of room. I don't know what's going to happen with Microsoft. Maybe it's their earnings that does it. The sentiment's not good. They're scared going into the end of the year. I don't know. But when it starts giving some rollover exhaustion here, I am looking for kind of this downside eventually pullback. Okay, it always happens. All right, very similar to right here. Gets up to this 464, and then from what is that? July of last year into August. So that whole month for Microsoft gave pretty much all those gains right back. So I'm very interested in this, but I don't want to get in too early. I don't want to be down trading against necessarily, but it's getting real interesting. Getting real interesting up here. A little bit overbought. Got a little bit more room potentially on the weekly. So maybe the weekly can get up there a couple more weeks. But I would suspect that Microsoft, which is a heavy hitter, obviously in the NASDAQ, and that's kind of what I'm kind of on edge about. You know, Microsoft and Meta are taking off, right? We've got NVIDIA that's taken off already, but we've got Amazon and Apple that are kind of lagging, right? Along with Google lagging a little bit. So we've got we typically want most correlated Mag 7 or your majority of your stocks that move the markets to go in correlation, because what I don't want to happen is I don't want some news to hit Microsoft and it pulls us back down and I can't get that momentum I need on, my stocks that I want to go up, vice versa. Right. So that's why I'm telling my community, just be like, okay, let's take it out further and trust the stocks that are beaten down, that are not going anywhere. Right. Shares are a little bit safer. Longer dated all options contracts are a little bit safer. And then some of the ones that are a little overextended, let's be patient for that pullback. Okay. All righty. Let's go into our semiconductor sector now, and then I'll wrap us up there. It's just a midweek update. So we see the SMH, which is our semiconductor ETF, kind of gives us a signal of what's happening with the overall sector of semiconductors. So your NVIDIA, MU, AVGO, AMD, right? And you see there that it looks very similar to QQQ or the NASDAQ. Do you see that bullish breakout sitting above that 250 now as support? So if that's giving that signal from its own right and has a little bit more room to go, then that could send off our respective semiconductor stocks back to all-time highs, back to highs. So let's look at NVIDIA right here. NVIDIA is starting to mount above this 140, 141 area. Okay. On a market right there, 141. Okay. Starting to mount above that 141, which is sitting right there. All right. So if NVIDIA can take out that 143.78 and get into the 144, there's nothing but room, in my opinion, up to 148 and then 150. Okay. So you can get that little next squeeze, and maybe AVGO earnings will do that to give us that squeeze up into there. Okay. When we get up into this 149, 150 area, we need to be a little bit mindful. There will be some profit taking, but at that point, we've tried once, we've tried twice, 3 times. And is this the time where they break out? Could be. Okay. So NVIDIA looking extremely bullish right now. No signs of any extreme sell signals, anything like that. We would have to break back below that 137 to get concerned. Okay. I would say back below this 136, really. That's the caution area right there. All right. Back below that 136, right? That will roll over and come back into 132. And then that's when that kind of rollover pullback and failure trap would come in. Other than that, holding strong right there. All right. AVGO, just until its earnings, cool. Taking off. 270 in sight. I think 280 in sight, unless some guidance comes in and traps people up here. Other than that, it's just bullish. I'd wait till after earnings, see what it does. There could be a trading opportunity on Friday morning. Palantir, my Palantir folks, just kind of consolidating up here, sitting up here, consolidating. I like that it's holding above that previous high, 125.55, mounting above that, holding there. It's getting very volatile though. As you can see, snap back down right here as people chase the highs from 135, snap back down $10 today, right? So if you gotta be, this is exactly, why you never want to chase, especially at highs. I know it's bullish, but you have to be patient to wait for that pullback to take it right back up. Okay. So Palantir holds above 130, holds above that 120, just say 126, right? You can get that rotation back up. If it fails back underneath this 125.55, gets in the 124s, right? That may be a little concerning for Palantir, as it may have a deeper pullback back in that 120 and then filling some of those gaps down below. All right. But other than that, right, as long as it holds this kind of trend right here, looking extremely bullish. So right now, what I would say for any beginners, okay, is that I would just sit on your hands, buy your shares, or get in a community where you can learn how to trade. I don't care what community it is, as long as you are learning from that person and you like their teaching style and you're like, man, okay, it's making sense, right? Also, for my experienced folks, I would say just be mindful of your entries, okay? Obviously, if you entered calls on Palantir at 134, you got smacked today, okay? So just be mindful of entries are important. You can be bullish, but if you're trading specifically with options or trading in general, maybe futures, entries are important, exits are important at certain levels when you have volatility, because you're like, man, if I would have entered calls yesterday, I would have been green, but I entered calls a day late and now I'm red. I'm always, on the wrong side, right? So that's why I always say, don't chase, wait for the trade to come to you. Patience. You may have to wait a couple of days. You may have to wait a week for your trade to start building and playing out so you can get that really good entry. And specifically in options, you can have a better price point for your options contract. Okay. So Palantir, there's your level right there. You can follow my levels and mark it on your charts, which would be right above that previous high. Okay, let's go to Tesla. Tesla getting hit here with some selling pressure, as you can see on a higher time frame, right? And it's on its last leg here. This is kind of do or die for Tesla in the short term if it can rebound from here, okay? So I've got these caution areas up on Tesla that you can see right there at that caution area, that 127, really just 130. Right at that level is where we dropped underneath there and fell all the way back down to 300 and some change, okay? And there are some gaps below to fill. So if you are a Tesla bull right now, okay, I would kind of sit on your hands and not try to catch this falling knife right now if you are trading it, okay? I know some of, folks are like, man, this pullback, we're taking off to 400. Now on a weekly time frame, yeah, I can see it. But before going to 400, I would say we can get a pullback back to that 292 to 300 level, okay? That would be the bigger retest, would be looking like that. So it's going to seem like it's very drastic in the short term if we do get that big pullback potentially. But I think that is the best area personally for that takeoff to the next level, okay? Now it could bounce at 300 and want to hold that psych level here at 300. And then you also have 310 and some change, okay? So if you are a Tesla bull and you like it for the summer, typically June is very bullish for Tesla. So this pullback could be a catapult once Elon stops talking and it goes from there. Okay. So I'd get interested if you're a Tesla bull back closer to that 315, 310, ultimately 300, and then giving yourself some time on your contracts. You can see there, right, that there's no stopping this right now, in my opinion, with that pullback into that 310 full gap fill underneath 310 to 300, and then that full move back to that previous high right there at 293. Okay. So I think that would be the best risk to reward. If you're scalping or day trading, you could maybe look at some of these tighter levels at 315 for a little bounce and recovery off of there. But as long as it's below this 335, and then I would say more so 340. Okay. It's kind of that, head and shoulders formation roughly right here like that. So Tesla getting some selling pressure right now. All right. Now, if you want to scalp it down, right, you could get a nice move underneath if it can pop, right? Or this is a little bear flag here, break underneath 327. You could get that nice move down into 315 and 320 for the remainder of the week and potentially into the beginning of next week. All right. Especially if you have a little bit of selling pressure potentially that will accelerate it with QQQ and SPY. So if QQQ is pulling back, if SPY is pulling back, you could accelerate Tesla to the downside. You can get that momentum push. All right. Final one I'll mention here, CrowdStrike had earnings. So I missed my entry on CrowdStrike today. It's one of my top watches for calls. After this drop, calls pushed up, those contracts went 500, 600%. Okay. So I get very interested towards the end of the week. If CrowdStrike can pull back from a higher low above this 450, 455 area and potentially get some momentum back up with the market, or without the market back to retest 470 and then get into the gap at 480. It's going to need some momentum with the last 2 days of the market, and maybe NFP can do that. Non-farm payrolls can send the market, and CrowdStrike can fill that gap before the end of the week. All right. So I'll be looking for targets of 470 again, and then maybe 480 if you can get some momentum push. All right. So watch CrowdStrike as long as it holds this 450 and then 456, right? Forming that higher low there on CrowdStrike. All right. So I like that. Anytime there's gap fills on a very solid company back to the upside, if it holds supports, is going to fill that gap pretty quickly. As you can see, it filled half the gap already. Let's do a Fibonacci retracement down here from there. And it's sitting roughly in that golden pocket. Okay. Sitting roughly in this golden pocket kind of buy zone right here. All right. So if it can build in here and take out that 465 again, you've got 473, you've got 481, and then you've got back to highs, which would squeeze it back like that. Okay. All right. That's it. It's a kind of midweek update. HIMS getting some selling pressure here. Nice double top there. So I know HIMS is big in a lot of folks' portfolios. I watch these lower levels. If it breaks below that $50 level, right, I think you're going to get some more selling pressure back into 41, potentially 46, 48. But I'd long-term buy, love HIMS. I'd pick it back up in the, if it can get back in the mid 30s, that'd be even better. But yeah, HIMS, beautiful pullback into 50 again. So if you want to pick some up at 50, great, but there is some selling pressure. I like it back in the mid 30s. And if you can get it lower than that, even better. All right. So be careful up here. You can see a lot of selling pressure stacked up, almost a triple top if you consider that, and that, and momentum back down. But if it holds 50, it could easily reverse. Okay. Some might call this a cup and handle. Okay. This could be a kind of cup and handle formation. You see that cup, handle, and then take off. So I look out for it. I don't want to get too bearish at all as a deeper pullback, but I just watch that $50 level, 50 to 51. If it holds that, that could be that handle that takes off. All right. Well, that's it. I can keep going. You see my watch list here for my day trading. I'm just looking at these different stocks and looking at them for the sectors and what they're doing. And we're watching for key levels, and I have my alerts on. All right. Peace, love, and blessings to you. Midweek update. Thank y'all so much for the support. For those that have used any links, whether it be Webull or Robinhood, those that have used the Top 1 Futures link, thank y'all so much for the support. It's going back in the channel to help build and grow. It gives me the time to do these. Also, if you've joined Leverage University anytime or you're on the fence, we'd love to have you. There should be a small discount code that pops up. And you can start with a weekly plan. You can start with, paying in full for the year if you really like it, if you don't like monthly stuff. And we'd love to have you inside, getting the trade ideas and learning a little bit more extensively. All right. Peace, love, and blessings to you. Make sure you give this video a like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.